Old One-Eye is a unique Tyranid carnifex that led the assault on the Ultramarines' world of Calth, renowned for its unkillable nature. Even when a plasma bolt was delivered through its eye into its brain, it was seen on the battlefield shortly thereafter, fighting as hard as ever. There's rumors it's been killed over a dozen times and now has been seen on multiple battlefields. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we're covering Old One-Eye, the legendary carnifex of unkillable stature. So, Old One-Eye comes in at 140 points, and he has the standard Carnifex stat line for the most point. He moves 8 inches, he's toughness 9 with a 2+ save, 9 wounds, a leadership 8+, and OC 3, so fairly standard. For that points cost, it's not standout, but it's not awful either. Where he does get a lot of value is his melee weapons. Now, in terms of melee weapons, Old One-Eye's claws and talons have 2 modes, that would be, of course, strike and sweep. And when he is on his strike mode, he has 6 attacks that hit on 3s, so more accurate than normal Carnifexes, at a massive strength 14, AP 3, and damage d6+1. This is a rather apocalyptic profile to hit any sort of armored enemy with, whether it be Space Marines, Terminators, vehicles. Nothing is going to want to be in melee with this guy, especially considering his special rules, which we will get into shortly. And then, of course, on sweep mode, he has 12 attacks, so really good at clearing hordes that hit on 3s at strength 6, AP 1, and damage 1. Of course, strength 6 is a big break point for a lot of things that makes it more efficient against guardsmen, Eldar, orcs. All of these things will really not want to be in melee with him because, well, they rely on either their toughness, in the case of orcs, or on, being hard to save, or like having good saves in the case of Sisters or Eldar. This guy does have the AP and he has the strength to just be scything through them with ruthless efficiency. In terms of abilities, he has Leader and Feel No Pain 5+, but weirdly enough lacks Deadly Demise, which the normal Carnifexes have. But that's, neither here nor there. I guess it was just a slight error. Maybe he's never had Explode rules. I may be wrong. In terms of his leader ability, it's called Alpha Leader, unsurprisingly, and when he's leading a unit, when models in that unit make attacks, you can reroll the hit roll. Now this is huge for Carnifexes because they hit on 4s, and also it's huge because it applies at range and in melee. So there is a very, very solid reason to just give Carnifexes ranged and melee weapons. This applies, of course, to their bioplasma, their spine banks, and the weapon of choice you give them, in addition to their melee weapons, preferably claws, in my opinion. And then his other ability, which will be useful when he's on his own, should his Carnifexes be blown to smithereens. It's called Endless Regeneration, and in each player's command phase, this model regains D3 wounds. Now this is very useful. Its Feel No Pain already makes him very tough. 2+ save is super good. And, he's very tough, and this makes him a lot tougher. And if you're even just a little lucky, this guy will be almost impossible to put down in a lot of situations. It will require focused and a lot of dedicated anti-tank firepower. In terms of leader options, unsurprisingly, he can only lead Carnifexes, which does mean Carnifexes are his best leader option, just by default, but that's not to say that they're bad. With this guy, Carnifexes are really, really fearsome. Their suite of guns, and preferably crushing claws, as I mentioned, they can destroy most things in melee. It is rather pricey, about a quarter of your army, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, just because they're so general purpose, especially if you equip your Carnifexes in the way I think is right, which will make it very hard for them to get bogged down by things like Gretchen or Imperial Guardsmen, and with Old One-Eye's own melee, that will be hard already, but before you even get into melee with them, of course, the Carnifexes can bring Stranglethorn Cannons, Spine Banks, Bioplasma, which just makes them very efficient at killing those pesky chaff. In terms of detachments, it's sort of similar to the normal Carnifexes. He is just a souped-up Carnifex. He does like sustained against infantry since he already wounds most vehicles, but Carnifexes prefer lethal hits, so just go with lethal hits. Obviously matchup dependent, but I'm just saying in terms of how you want to activate your special rule. There is the stratagem to let you activate another one, so if you want to, you can go lethal hits most of the time and then sustained hits when necessary. In terms of Crusher Stampede, he already hits on 3s and he's re-rolling everything, so +1 to hit isn't the biggest deal. The +1 to wound is a nice option, though he might, oddly enough, heal over it every turn, which means he wouldn't be able to go on a rampage on his last couple wounds because he will just regenerate back to over half strength. And walking through walls is, of course, good for Carnifexes, just given that they're decently large monsters. They're not enormous, but they're not tiny either. But Detachment sucks, don't run it. Unending Swarm, unsurprisingly, is based on the little Gribbly monsters, so really no buffs for the Carnifexes, but he's a really solid choice if you just want a big unit of extra muscle to back up your hordes of Termagants, Hormagaunts, whatever it may be. Assimilation Swarm, there's really no support there. They lack the keyword, and they already do run I believe it's hard. I don't remember all the units with it, but it's just a detachment that's really confusing, and Carnifexes don't have much of a place there. Vanguard is also similar. They don't have the keyword, so they're not getting anything except fallback and charge, which isn't useful, really. Carnifexes want to stay in combat. Though if you're fighting like Custodes, you could have them strategic reserves turn 1. And then in Synaptic Nexus, these guys make a really good shield wall. They're tough to get through, so if you have something like Zoanthropes behind them, these guys make up a great defensive wall for them, and of course they love +1 to hit, +1 to advance and charge, and a 5+ invul, and is useful against Melta weapons, which would be very effective against them. And then, with that, we're on to sort of the best use case. And he really is, just like he is in the lore. He is super tough, and he's really, really nasty. His Carnifexes just really enjoy, of course, running at the enemy very fast. As they try and shoot them, they get faster, and then they get into the enemy lines. They start destroying things, consolidating into other things. They really need to be targeted, or these guys will run riot through their entire army. There's not a lot you can do about it. I do recommend running your Carnifexes with Stranglethorn cannons, just because they're the best at clearing out chaff, which would be a very good way to deal with them, just bogging them down in Gretchen and stuff like that. But if you can just Stranglethorn, Spine Bank, and Bioplasma them before they get into melee, they either won't get to melee, or they will be so minimal that they're not slowing you down at all. And then, of course, the Claws plus Old One-Eye's melee is a lot of damage in melee, and when they're re-rolling everything, they're very accurate. He is, unfortunately, an epic hero, which makes sense lore-wise. While Old One-Eye has been, made into an official adaptation by the Tyranids, it's still very rare and usually only seen on one Carnifex. So it makes sense, but it does mean that there's not much point in running any Carnifexes past this, because if you want to run a solo Carnifex, I would just bring a Horuspex most times, unless you're bringing a Gunfex, which I think is a fine choice for just a gun turret to deal with any pesky flanking units. But that is sort of my biggest problem with him. But this guy with his Carnifex retinue is very nice. They're going to hurtle at the enemy and do a lot of damage and require a lot of focus fire to take down. And there's not really much more to it. This isn't a tricky, sneaky unit. They're a big monster that wants to hit things really hard. So just literally beeline for the enemy and just start ripping things apart. And even if not, these guys can draw a lot of fire for your maybe more squishy damage dealers like Gene Stealers. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.